following is a local resident producers program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of CATV2, Oshkosh Community Media Services, the City of Oshkosh, or Time Warner Cable.
Hi everybody, welcome to Eye on Oshkosh. Dan Rylance and Cheryl Hentz here, and very pleased to welcome back a friend and a frequent guest, our state representative from the local district here. Gordon Hintz is here, and so it may be a little uncomfortable in the first few minutes or so, but you were reaching out to us at the same time that we were reaching out to you.
So we're glad you're here.
Yeah, we are.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So we want to primarily focus the bulk of this show on the proposed budget that Governor Walker has put forth and so forth. But, you know, that could take up the full hour, and I don't want to, you know, not have time to talk about some of the other obvious things. So we just talked and said we're going to get these out of the way first. So let's talk about the incident in Appleton with the Heavenly Touch massage parlor. There was a situation where the place was apparently under surveillance for alleged prostitution activity. You were there, not saying you were involved in that activity of any kind, but you pled no contest to I think it's a misdemeanor ordinance thing up there. Touching or offering to touch sexual parts. You pled no contest, paid a fine of just a little over $2,000. We heard bits and pieces in the newspaper, but we really don't know what happened.
The only major thing I have to say is, I screwed up. Made a bad decision in my personal life that was certainly inconsistent with, the standard I hold for myself as a person. And, I'm a public figure, and if you don't want to be in the paper for dumb things, don't do dumb things. And, as bad as I feel worse about letting everybody down. I'm the representative for the area, and, I know there's been a lot of questions. I never avoided responsibility. I, answered all questions related to things, and, was told I could have fought it, maybe gotten it dropped, but the reality was I just wanted it to be over with. It was an ordinance violation. Again, happened to be there at the same time, cooperated, and I'm hoping to move on, but I, realize that a large part of my job has been, and success in my job has been about building a relationship with people in the community and built on trust. And, this jeopardizes some of that, but I hope that, people will give me a second chance and can focus on my job.
How is it that they sent a ticket in the mail to you? You didn't even know that this had happened.
No,
right?
And again, I was never arrested. I was never read any rights. I was never cited.
Never taken to jail.
Found out, on Facebook that there was a link on CCAP, and then received something in the mail about a week after it was in the newspaper. And so part of the problem was, I'm a believer that if you mess up and you know about it, you try to own it. I wasn't going to run from anything, but it was hard because once it was out, I had to try to get clarified exactly, what it was, and then talk to an attorney, and if there was something going on, I can say, it's an ordinance violation. Again, I was given options to try to contest it, but, I'm guilty of going, making a bad decision, being somewhere I probably shouldn't have been, and just wanted to put it to bed. I wasn't going to try to run from it or beat it, but, again, if you don't want to be in the paper, for bad things, don't do dumb things. So.
Well, but is it dumb to walk into a massage parlor and get a massage? I mean, a lot of us do that, and there are legitimate massage parlors out there. And how is one to know if something's under surveillance?
And, these are all, questions. It was my understanding it was a above-board place that maybe changed, and, it wasn't my intention. I was not someone that was there several times or anything. But, I answered questions at the time that I was asked, and, again, maybe some he said, they said, but, I probably recognized that it wasn't the kind of place you want to go to, and if that's the case, you should get right out of there. And, again, I screwed up.
Okay. You have anything on that, or shall we move on to?
You there just once?
It was the second time.
Second time. Okay.
I mean, when I came forward on everything, both with the press and with the, during when I was questioned, answered all questions and came forward with dates, times, and everything else.
This is a drinking establishment too? Can you drink there?
No.
No. Did you go by yourself?
Yes.
Okay, so you didn't go with a guy, another bunch of guys going around, we're going to go to the massage parlor or something. Okay.
No.
All right, that's all I got.
All right, okay. All right, let's talk about the Michelle Litchens incident. We don't really know for certain exactly what happened there. I mean, Dick Spanbauer was on the show a couple weeks ago, and, he said he didn't even, he walked in or got
He
there
said he came a second
just
later,
as it was
just as it was over with.
ending.
Yeah.
And so he didn't really see the incident, although he heard a lot about it. There's been a lot of scuttlebutt about it. And my problem with it, the whole thing, not just with what you did, but the way Michelle has sort of personalized this and jumped on. Milked it is a good word. She has milked it to her political advantage. She's been all over the news with it, making little
The robocall for
things on
Prosser, I
political
don't, you hear about that
robocalls.
one or not? Yeah.
First she says she didn't take it personally, and she didn't feel like she was ever threatened. And then she comes out with the robocall at the other end of the spectrum and says her life had been threatened, but she's gotten over it. It's very disingenuous. So tell us what
I can
exactly
only speak,
happened.
for,
Sure, but tell us
for
what-
myself.
tell us
and
what
to be honest
happened.
with you again, obviously a bad few weeks for someone like me. I mean, and my, these things are self-inflicted. And again, if you don't want to be in the news for bad reasons, don't do dumb things.
Sure.
But tell us what
It
happened.
was this was during the contentious, budget repair bill, 61 hours straight. There's no, there's no good time. You should never use profanity, especially among colleagues. If there's a group of people that have to try to keep it together when passions are inflamed, it should be leaders, and I certainly, failed in that regard. But the reality is, as I remember for that night, the state troopers surrounded the chamber. We were told we had 15 more speakers until potentially debate was going to be cut off. We'd had a previous rule violation that, if you're going to have rules for how debates are going to go, you shouldn't violate those rules. And when all of a sudden they instantly voted, to close off debate spontaneously, I tried to run out of the chamber because I think I was going to lose it. And I almost made it before I lost it. Happens to be that Michelle sat in the back row. I was passing her. Now, I don't make any comments directed at anybody. I did use profanity, and again, none of this would have happened if I hadn't done that. I was unaware at the time that anybody took it that way. I got a call 4 days later from somebody saying, they're going to try to, put you down when you're wounded. And sure enough, I saw that WTMJ, the Weekly Standard, and Fox News were all reporting it on the same time. I got a call from the Northwestern. And I called Michelle and I said, I apologize if there was anything taken. And, I obviously, like I said, I think we've got to hold ourselves to a higher standard, and I let that down. But, there certainly was nothing, personal. It was mostly to do with, you guys aren't going to get away with this. If you do, you're going to be, politically
Politically dead.
or in trouble. And there had been no certainly no beef between us. I mean, we've always known each other, and even though we probably disagree on a lot of things, have had a civil, discussion and discourse. And, like I said, 61 hours, no sleep, frustration over the process and the policy, and probably the temperature in the building being a little hot. But, it's allowed me to step back, certainly apologize to my constituents, but also to my colleagues, and have tried to use it as an opportunity to sort of reach out to some of the freshmen, where this has probably been pretty hard to start the session and think this is how it is. Just to tell them that it doesn't have to be this way, and we really do need to try to come back to not sort of play to the passions on both sides. I will say this, after that, things kind of took off as fact. Something that was a pretty unremarkable moment at the time. 4 days later, once it got reported, I've received more mail from Alabama, Florida, and Arizona than I ever have, calls from everybody. And I actually dropped in on the civility discussion that's going on in Oshkosh, and I was invited to, and obviously fell on my sword in terms of, someone who'd kind of was not acting so civil, but with the pledge that, recognizing how more important it is during these tough times. But the other thing I wanted to say was, when the reporting and the media takes off in the way it does and focuses on, even though I'm pretty sure that exact statement that's being repeated was not said, the literal interpretation of it has led to, even less civility in terms of the response. And while I can't control that, if you continue to bait people and send it out there that's happened. I mean, I know on the auto call it was, I had my life threatened.
Exactly, and that's why I find Michelle Litchen's actions more offensive than what you said. I mean, I certainly disagree with you losing it like that, but I understand also how that can happen. While not making excuses for that, though, for you, I do find her behavior more offensive than what you did, because she's taken it to a whole new level, and she's milking it, like you said.
And this is politics, and again, if you don't want to end up in the headlines,
Don't do it.
I don't have anything to say other than none of this would have happened if I had been able to either make it out of the room or just refrain from doing it, and trying to use it as an opportunity, and like I said, it's self-inflicted.
Yeah. Two minor points. One is, was it face-to-face, or did you kind of turn to the Republicans over there and say that?
They're sitting in the last seat. She's in the corner. I was in the back row. I didn't, like I said, if you hadn't told me about the moment, I'm not sure I remembered it other than.
So this wasn't a Yogi Berra movement where you're right in her face?
No.
Okay.
And again, I didn't hear anything about it until I got a heads up 4 days later that they were going to try to pin this on me.
Okay, then it was said that she apologized, or that she accepted your apology. Did she say that to you personally?
Yeah, again, it was the worst that it was actually someone that I had a good relationship with, and I felt awful that if it was taken that way. We had a good discussion. Again, it's politics, so whether it's her or someone encouraging her, people are going to try to take advantage of things. I'm not sure if it really benefits, anybody to keep it out there. But again, I can't say a whole lot about it because, again, my actions were what started this.
But then she asked for you the House to take disciplinary action against you after she accepted your apology?
I don't know. I made sure that I went around and talked to each and every member, either in a group or individually, just to say, I regret if this, caused anybody to,
But you haven't been disciplined by the
No, and I think everybody realized that it was a pretty tough time and wanted to move on. I think, we're not that, it should ever be tolerable, but it's there was a lot of things going on at that time, and tempers were pretty sensitive. So, I tried to accept accountability for that, and hope, we can raise the bar a little bit.
So it's not like you turned around and pointed at her and yelled this.
No, and I didn't.
Just
If you really think about it, it doesn't really make sense. I mean, we were in a broader debate. She hadn't really been outspoken or speaking at all on it. It was more, I could. Again, there was rules violations. There was things I probably deserved harsh. Gosh darn it all! What are you guys doing? So. Okay.
Did you want to jump in on anything, or you want me to go on to the next thing here?
Well, let's do the speech, and then the speech occurred during the 60-hour marathon where you were on YouTube? kind of that passionate
No,
speech?
that was the. So I mean,
That
it's
was
so
like a
hard
week
to
or so
process
before,
everything.
Huh? Was that
Yeah,
before?
I thought it was
so
a week or so
Okay.
before.
I mean,
Okay.
you know, and I think I sort of did the timeline in the speech. You know, what's been frustrating about everything is, you know, we kind of heard, oh, we're going to have this budget crisis, and, you know, it got introduced, you know, but before it was handed out to us, I found out on the radio, from a radio ad saying support this before I even got a copy of it, and we were told it was going to pass in 6 days. We all arrived in Madison to begin debate on it after the Joint Finance Committee had their hearings cut off. You know, we were in the second day of things, and I arrived on the floor at 5 minutes to 5, and they were already voting on it, you know, trying to, I think they thought maybe we weren't going to show up. And this had come after, you know, some prior problems, and just the whole way, you know, the policies that have been pursued both in the repair bill and the budget are bad enough, but what's even been worse has been the process and the treatment, you know, and the legality of a lot of the things. And I don't know, I haven't watched the speech because I remember how I felt. I have seen some pictures and some new veins that I haven't seen appeared. I don't have an anger issue, but
It was a good halftime
I certainly,
talk.
you know, but I do know, you know, there were 250,000 views in 48 hours. I got letters and emails from Germany, Egypt. I mean, if you ever want to know what it's like to go viral, you know, so it's both, you know, I mean, I think the combination of, you know, being upset and being passionate about something tapped into an existing feeling that a lot of people had. And if that, you know, I still have people come up to me here, and I don't know, again, I have mixed feelings about it because I remember, you know, I had my colleagues looking at me sort of with a combination of go for it and are you going to have a stroke?
Well, a lot of people, though, thought that because it was such an impassioned speech, that it was just outstanding. I mean, I've heard
And
that
that was sort
from-
of your response, wasn't it?
Yeah, I thought
Yeah,
it was very
yeah.
good. You know, I don't know that I'd use the word outstanding,
Yeah.
but that's what
Yeah,
I
but
heard
not
from some
negative.
people. And a lot of people told me that they thought it was terrific. And then a few kind of thought, well, maybe it was a little over the top, you know.
And again, you know, I mean, I was truly upset. It was a real response. I felt like I wasn't being treated like an elected official that I was, and that's a disservice. And I feel like a lot of people feel that they weren't being heard or listened to or considered, and that this was, you know, being jammed through. And then, you know, there's a reason why we have basic protections in there for rules, process, procedures to be deliberative, and we wanted to utilize those. It was also sort of the ending of that day. You know, we thought we were going to keep going or try to vote, but I think they realized that, you know, I think that speech combined with some others kicked us into next week and allowed us to have more time to deliberate this thing.
Let me ask this, because, I mean, that's part of what you were upset about, is the fact that they started voting before the scheduled meeting time. How is that even legal, I guess, you know? So how is it that there are no legal challenges to that vote?
Well, they didn't. It was they had. What happens is a bill needs to be read, you know, on 3 separate days, and they were having a vote to end off debate, to, you know, advance second and then third reading, and so it looked like they were 1 vote away from being able to vote on this thing, and I think they did take it back, and we went and reopened up debate. So I think when they look back at the tape, and even when everybody else had arrived, it still wasn't 5 o'clock, you know, and so I think they were anticipating us being up to some games when we really weren't, and it sort of backfired and was another misstep in the process.
I want to talk about sort of a political report card for you after these 3 incidents, in terms of your future. We had Jim Fitzhenry, the managing editor of Northwestern, on here a couple weeks ago, and we asked him about that, and maybe you can respond to his evaluation. He's a very fair conservative. He said he thought politically, you can win again. But he thought you forfeited your ascendance in leadership position within your caucus. Response to either or both of those?
I mean, right now, and I don't want to give you a canned, cliched answer other
Okay.
than to say,
You don't know.
yeah, I mean, look, I'm a human being. I made some mistakes. I'm certainly fired up and passionate. I disagreed strongly with both the policy and the process of things. But I'm very committed to what I do. I'm not doing this because I want to be, president. I've always said I'll take it, where it goes as long as I'm truly into it. Look, I recognize that the things that have happened have been self-inflicted, and I'll have to deal with those consequences, both in my relationship with my constituents as long as I'm in this position, and any considerations of the future. And certainly, again, plan on hopefully learning from it and moving forward. I have used the opportunity to, really be patient and talk to more of my colleagues, and really been trying to use it as an opportunity to promote more civil discourse and remind myself that as fired up as we are, we're the ones who really do need to keep it together.
Okay. Can I make just an editorial
Sure,
comment?
yeah, go ahead.
I compliment you on coming here and on your candor and asking questions, which is a direct opposite of the senator from this district, Randy Hopper, who will not answer any questions. So I applaud you for having the guts to admit your failures and answer questions, which I think your constituents expect, and I think they'll be pleased with.
I think it's
with
the
your
least
response.
that you owe people.
Yeah, okay, so
And I echo those comments, so couldn't have said it any better.
thank you.
So, all
Well,
right.
let's get rid of this.
Yeah, let's get rid of that.
Are you
Let's-
sure?
Yeah, we're sure.
Let's talk about the budget. There are, and Dan and I, as we mentioned before we started, neither one of us have read the proposed budget in its
It's hard
entirety.
to follow from here.
Yeah. But I think we all have some sense of where some of the cuts are being proposed. Education is certainly, a big one. $834 million total from K through 12 education. And in another show, we've talked with someone from the school district who said that amounts to $518 per pupil in the first year. That's a lot. And there's one other point that I want to make with respect to that, because early estimates showed the district would be able to more than cover its loss in revenue without letting go of staff or cutting programs if the governor's proposal to limit collective bargaining to wages became law. It has since become law, even though there are some legal challenges to it, and it can't be enacted yet. But just playing devil's advocate here, isn't that an argument for collective bargaining for wages to, to remain in effect?
That, you mean the fact that it didn't balance the budget, or that it had nothing to do with
the
it?
fact that it would, the fact that they would not have to let go of staff or cut programs.
If they maintain collective bargaining, if they just took the pension.
No, this said if collective bargaining, if the law went into effect.
Okay.
That's why I'm kind of playing devil's advocate with this one.
Yeah, and I'm not sure I totally, understand the angle. I mean, all we've heard all along is that, we're going to give local government the tools to do things, and the interesting thing, and I think the Northwestern wrote about it effectively, the counties, the school districts, the municipalities have long, certainly had some ideas that have been worked on for a while that they wanted to see in terms of changes to mediation arbitration, to binding arbitration, but never advocated for the types of policies and proposals that are in the budget repair bill and that are also in the budget, yet they're the ones who are going to get impacted the most. So they've been handed tools that they had nothing to do with, and I think Mark Roloff said it's disingenuous to say that this is going to cover things and that they were never brought to the table on ways that they might be a part of the solution and reduce the pain to services. The repeal of collective bargaining and the decertification of unions and really the end of public employee unions in Wisconsin for all intensive purposes is more of a cynical and political attempt. There's been a lot of national discourse that Walker was going to send the trial balloon and wanted to do so, and I think the response that you saw was pretty real in terms of how people felt, and we do have a lot of positions that people do want to say in their workplace conditions, and it's been how we do things in Wisconsin for a while. So I would say the initial estimates were, they'll be able to cover this, the cuts with the savings, but I think it doesn't quite, it might work on paper, but it hasn't worked in reality when you put it into consideration with the police and fire that are exempt and with some of the other fixed costs not associated with, the tools that have been given.
How do you have an explanation, Gordon, as to why? This kind of thing has been done elsewhere. It did kind of follow on the heels of it happening here, But certainly there wasn't a huge stink made in other states, as we saw with protesting here. I mean, it just sort of got passed quietly, if you will, certainly quietly compared to here. You know, why do you think people are so passionate and upset about this here when it didn't occur that way in these other places?
Yeah, and I don't know what the other people campaigned on in those states, but I think a lot of it, again, I think the governor's made a mistake and he's burned a lot of capital just by the mishandling of things. Again, the process, the way he's gone about doing things, the 20-minute phone call with the Koch brothers that kind of showed a different side of things.
The Koch brothers, I'm using air quotes because it really wasn't the
right,
Koch
right.
brothers.
You know, but it was revealing, I think, and
Yes.
and in a way that kind of scared you a little bit about maybe what someone's true priorities and ideologies were, but. The governor was pretty clear about wanting to get concessions during the campaign. I was surprised that he hadn't even begun negotiating, and not even trying to bring people to the table to be part of the solution. I think there are governors and states that are looking for some labor cost savings, and we had heard here that maybe they would put all the teachers into the state public employee pool. I think there were some things that would have achieved some of the outcomes, and I've talked to Republican members saying, you guys could have done this another way, and they said, we know, but the governor doesn't want to backtrack. He doesn't look this bad, and I think sort of the worst fears of people about collective bargaining rights, about the way we've done things in Wisconsin, about the say in the workplace, about our labor peace, and about being one of the first states to establish the process where we bring employees and management together in a room to work out our problems had been long-standing. And the headlines when they say, Democrats or pro-union rally happened, and that's not really what I was seeing. I mean, once it impacted public education, you saw families, you saw, and I don't make any assumptions that people down at the Capitol protesting were Democrats. I heard from people that had never written a letter before, never called before, never stood on a corner before, but I think that they thought this was out of line with how we do things in Wisconsin. I think they feared for the erosion of certain public services, and we don't know that the worst isn't to come in some areas. We have the nation's biggest private prison contractors registered in the state of Wisconsin to lobby. It's something that the governor pursued in Milwaukee County with their jail system. And so I think it was the tip of the iceberg that really motivated a lot of people. And a lot of the class and equality issues that I think that people felt they were on the losing end of the stick that may have them participating in the Tea Party movement one year, I think, some of the same people, I think, came over because they sort of realized that this was an attack on good-paying jobs and middle-class jobs. I mean, I'm not saying that the result of some of the most egregious practices of public employee unions is fair or beneficial, but at least I know at the end of the day, it's a real human being at the end of that. I don't know if a janitor is worth $15 an hour or not. But I can tell you that I don't think it's such a bad thing for someone who's doing in that job to make a fair wage and choose to do so, whether it's for the benefits or the wages. I can tell you that getting rid of transparency or creating more loopholes in combined reporting, I don't know who benefits from that, and I'm sure they're not in our state.
Okay.
All right.
One of the paranoias I hear from state employees that are retired or state employees that are almost retired is they have this paranoia that he's going to get into their retirement fund. That is Governor Walker. Is there any way legally he can do that? Or illegally?
This is the crazy thing about everything is as bad shape in Wisconsin is in some areas, we're actually in better shape compared to a lot of states. And our retirement system is the second best funded in the country.
Exactly.
We do pay ongoing. We have been pretty successful, especially when the market's been good. No, I don't think so. Sure. I think the Governor Thompson at one point tried to transfer some money at one point and was beat back on that proposal.
By the court. Yeah.
I don't, I think a lot of people are insecure just because they no longer trust a lot of it because of the process and way things have been handled. But we'll be watching for it. But I think the real change, I think it's more about existing employees than it is about future employees. But I guess one last thing, one of the frustrating things I think for a lot of the state employees that maybe at retirement age but not ready to retire, or maybe pre-retirement age, is they couldn't get answers from OSER, the Office of State Employee Relations, on some of their existing or accrued benefits that they had earned over time.
Talking about sick leave, things
Well,
like
sick leave,
yeah.
which is a post-retirement health benefit. I mean,
Right.
we pay for it ongoing to
Exactly.
discourage people from, taking sick days, but also as a way to help get them maybe between retirement and Medicare eligibility or for
Exactly.
a supplement. So, but I mean, so they didn't know, and that's what kind of what the can you imagine if you're working and you want to continue working,
Right.
but it's simply the uncertainty drives you to retire earlier.
Or if you want to retire and they say, well, we're not going to give you all those hours, right?
Right.
That'd be the other.
Yeah.
The other,
Yeah. So, and there's other things, as well that I think are unintended consequences of sort of using the meat cleaver instead of microscope.
One
The
other
bottom
que-
line, the
oh, go ahead.
pensions are, the pension fund is safe.
It's unbelievably safe. I mean, it's actuarially, like
Yeah,
you said,
second
the
best funded
second
in the
best one.
country. There are a
Yeah.
lot of places when you
Yeah.
hear about pension problems.
Yeah, they spent it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The status of trying to remove the University of Wisconsin-Madison from the system, where is that at?
Hopefully it's dead.
Okay.
I'm happy to hear a number of legislators from around the state, and Chancellor Rick Wells really deserves a lot of the credit. He is, I think, maybe one of the longest standing serving chancellors. We had a lot of retirements around the state, but he early on, recognized the issue, how important it was to not just our university, but to our whole state. And I think it got traction, and I think it was an overreach by some of the leaders in Madison and the Walker administration. But until it's out, we're going to keep fighting it.
Is it in the budget bill?
It is in
It
the
is,
budget bill.
okay.
So, and it's
So-
something that if they are going to consider really should be pulled out, that
Okay.
needs a lot more deliberation. And that's been, quite frankly, the opinion of some of the people that are opposed to it.
Okay.
That they are just not comfortable. There's enough things to debate. This would be pretty substantial.
Go ahead, Cheryl.
So we've talked about how this is going to impact education here in the Oshkosh area. We touched on that a little bit. What about the city and the county? How do you see if this budget that he's proposed gets passed? How will that impact the city and the county?
Well, again, contrary to a lot of the language about giving local government the tools, the savings don't add up to the cuts. And while I understand frustration with property taxes, that's the mechanism that we give local governments to decide what kind of service they want to provide, and it's why we elect people to make those decisions. But we're a responsive body, and we've had caps in place the last few years that at least allowed for some growth and flexibility should they choose it. Now it's just zero. And I think there will be, service cut decisions that, I think Mark Roloff's been incredibly creative, and Mark Harris pretty creative at trying to get us through this pretty tough financial time. But I think there are going to be some tough choices ahead. As Wisconsin has held the line on taxes and cut some the last few years, we've seen an increase in fees and tuition and other things, and that's sort of, some of the trade-off.
Yeah.
The county did better than we thought on some of the direct aids, but family care, for instance, which is Medicaid funded, Winnebago County joined the Lakeland Care District. There's still some growing pains there. The goal was to provide, bipartisan solution to allow, people to live independently, those with developmental disabilities, to have the dollar follow the care. Some might need 1 day a week, some might need laundry, groceries, some might need more direct care, but it was to end the waiting list, to try to increase the level of care and flexibility. Just 1 year in, they're talking about capping enrollment, which will hit the wait list again, and a substantial cut that probably will come out of the providers who are already doing a pretty tough job and facing limited wages. So those are the kind of things that are administered through the county that are going to take a substantial hit. And just, everybody knew this was going to be a tough budget, whoever was going to be governor, and there were going to be some tough choices to be made. But the way that the cuts have been done and the certain priorities that are being made, I think, are disproportional in some areas, and they don't prioritize the kind of things that have enhanced the quality in Wisconsin, the quality of life in Wisconsin for a long time. So obviously the recycling cut to the city has been another local thing that's gotten a lot of attention, and while we've heard that legislators of both parties are want to restore it, until it's done, until they come up with the money out of somewhere else, I assume that it's in there. But it's crazy to me that we're debating something like recycling.
Although he sort of backpedaled on that in the last
That was the
week
first
or so.
thing, but I
Yeah.
mean, until it's out, I'm not going to believe it.
Yeah.
But I think that's the first time we've heard him backpedal on anything. With everything else that's happened, I think as a governor especially, you should be trying to build consensus for ideas and for policies and for direction, and sell your ideas. And if the reaction to some of the things you've proposed is 100,000 people out there, people feeling vulnerable, scared, if that's the reaction, then I really think you might want to take a step back and reconsider. It's not good to have the divisiveness that we have, right now from the body politic or from, community members, and I think that's something that's an unfortunate consequence.
Just maybe a little follow-up on
Sure,
that.
yeah, go ahead.
What power do the two Republican leaders have with the governor? Just from here, and it's superficial, seems to me that the governor's calling all the shots. Isn't there any independence upon the part of the Republican leadership on some of these things to say, Governor,
Well, I spent, during our floor debate, I spent a lot of time saying, you guys don't have to do this. In
Yeah.
fact, you can come to the rescue. I mean,
Right.
I know that, when we had single party control, although we didn't have the majorities, and maybe it's because we have sort of a bigger, more diverse tent, we couldn't get along at all half the time, but it's
Well, that's the
because we
Democrat-
wanted to
yeah.
stand up to some of the things that we felt were out of line with our districts. As I understand it, the governor was proactive in calling members, sort of keeping them in line and sort of saying, we're going to make history together.
Right.
That history was going to be something that would be celebrated by interest groups in Washington,
Right.
D.C., not by people around the state.
Right. So the leaders aren't,
Well,
he's
I
got
think-
total control is what you're saying, or near total control.
So far, and
Yeah.
again, there's 26 new freshman assembly Republicans out of 99 people total.
Okay.
They've only been here for 3.5 months.
They don't
and
know
for
where
all-
the restrooms are.
I think they think this is how things are.
Yeah,
And
I understand.
again, people have an obligation to stand up and represent their districts and their parts of the state. I was a little disappointed that some longstanding members like Senator Olson and Senator Ellis didn't, who've been, Senator Ellis he was the one who authored the collective bargaining bill for university employees. The people that were most reasonable, rational, and served during a less ideological era are the people that really should have been
Yes.
coming to the table. And that was most disappointing. I thought maybe with some of these proposals they would start here and then maybe end up here, but I think they're going for all of it.
Okay.
Well, and what I also find shameful, and truly shameful, is when Dick Spanbauer was here. He said that some of his Republican not constituents, his Republican counterparts came to him and said, Dick, we know where you're coming from. We agree with you, but we're not going to go against our party. We're not going to go against the governor. And they went ahead and voted for the collective bargaining thing to go through. That's just not a good public servant as far as I'm concerned. If you believe that something is wrong, then vote that way. Go against your party. And that's why when Dick was on, we were so proud of him. And,
Yeah.
and we told him that
And
because it's
and
tough
I
to
was
go
calling
against your
Dick
party.
during the debate, trying to say, are there anybody else out there? And really, to his credit, he said he, put forward a more moderate proposal that, was more balanced, but still achieved a lot of the governor's goals as try to have an alternative, and said, just couldn't get traction or support. But Dick campaigned as an open mind and made a commitment to the people he represents, and he's been a breath of fresh air to a lot of people on both sides. In what there's fewer Dick Spanbauers nowadays.
Yeah. You mentioned Medicaid earlier. Let's talk about Medicaid, because Badger Care is certainly part of that. And under Governor Walker's proposed budget, the Badger Care program that went into effect under Governor Doyle for childless adults, that has become a reality. Now under Governor Walker's proposed budget, it's going to go away. That's what's being proposed. How much of a reality do you think that is? Do you see that happening?
Well, clearly there's not as much of a priority by this administration on the need to provide, access to low-income health insurance, especially, those of us that we kind of had, a program that we wanted to expand to low-income individuals that were without health insurance. Of course, the economy tanked, and we found more people eligible for that. And while that drove up costs, there are people that would have no health insurance otherwise. The waiver that we did to expand the program and the program for childless adults really hit that target of people who found themselves kind of cut out. Private insurance wouldn't insure them. They didn't have the resources to be able to pay for their own insurance, but it was a program that really was, the letters you get from people who it's been an absolute savior for are the people who now face those things at risk again. They're talking about, restrictions on what will be covered, increased, co-pays and premiums, and again, one of the most offensive parts of the repair bill was taking a legislative oversight away and giving it to the Secretary of Health Services to sort of pick and choose, what was going to be covered or not. I mean, it's simply the people that are most in need, that are most vulnerable, who are traditionally in Wisconsin been our priority to protect, are those that seem to be the least priority for this administration. And I always like to remember that, Badger Care was a Tommy Thompson creation.
Well, why is it that childless adults are any less deserving of quality health care or health care period than someone who has children?
I mean, I think the original intent, when Badger Care started was, it's most important to try to get insurance to those children, and their parents. Childless adults, you hope, look, the best social program in the world is a good paying job. But, as we were able to get waivers and flexibility and come up with some ways to generate more federal dollars to expand the program, we've been able to become, I think we have the second highest rate of insurance coverage in the country, and largely that's been because we have this cost-effective program that makes a priority over protecting people that wouldn't have insurance otherwise. In other words, even if Medicaid doesn't fully pay for the actual cost, that cost shift is a lot less than it would have been. And again, we have a tough budget. We should always be looking for efficiencies, and but we're not getting a lot of answers because a lot of the budget just says cut off $500 million from the program and turn it over to one of the governor's appointments to, find ways to do it. And there's a lot of uncertainty out there in a program that's been, I think most people in Wisconsin value the fact that we don't turn our backs on those who are most in need, especially during this challenging time. Now, again, jobs would be the best thing that we can do, but I don't think you have to have mutually exclusive situations.
Care for seniors, that's also being targeted.
Yeah, Wisconsin has had another, Wisconsin creation, I think under the Thompson administration, that we've got a low-income prescription drug program that is simple, cost-effective, and targets the close to 100,000 seniors in Wisconsin who that addresses a lot of the problems that exist in the Medicare Part D program. And as proposed, senior care would have enough changes in it that it would no longer really exist, as it really kind of pushes people into the federal program, and for some of those people raise the cost of their prescriptions substantially. And members of both sides have expressed concern about this popular program, and I'm hopeful that'll be one of the things that's restored as well. But again, until it happens, I think people are sort of uncertain out there. I mean, this has been something that members of both parties, again, have supported in the past.
Okay.
All through this long legislative thing, we've heard what the Republicans are for and what the Democrats are against. To turn the coin a little bit, what are the Democrats for? And what would be your way to get rid of a $3.6 billion deficit? I haven't heard any of that.
Yeah, and I think that's a part of the being in the minority, but I was just having a discussion with someone there today. Even if you look, the governor said, we're not going to increase revenues. And I think everybody knew that whether you were going to have to cut spending or raise revenues, you were taking money out of the economy. Every program was going to receive some cuts, whether that was Tom Barrett or whether that was Gordon Hintz. It's what kind of cuts you're going to make. we're cutting education close to $1 billion, but we're increasing funding for virtual schools and charter schools, and we've had a record enrollment of private lobbyists for those. We're expanding the voucher school program. So again, we're diminishing our public schools and increasing funding for private schools. We are usually we pay for transportation funds with the gas tax, with vehicle registration fees. And now we're taking general fund money off car sales and increasing several $100 million from that normally go to schools, universities, and other things, and putting that into the transportation fund. So the road builders have never received more money, and now they're competing directly where they used to be separate and segregated. They're not. So the few things I wouldn't do are I wouldn't increase spending in areas and take the money out of. The cuts were going to be bad enough to education, given the size of the budget that they're involving. But I wouldn't cut off their capacity to provide the education in the state that we've all come to believe. I wouldn't usurp local control entirely by freezing and cutting their, aid and what they can raise. But look, the best thing we can do to recover is to grow the economy and grow revenues. That's going to come through human capital. I'll say one more thing. Before the budget crisis, if you remember in January, the other thing I wouldn't have done is I wouldn't have passed $141 million worth of relatively ineffective tax credits. I don't have a problem with making health savings accounts tax exempt, but it costs $49 million. That's $49 million that we have less to spend on other things. And only something like 1.3% of health policy holders have a health savings account. And so again, it's about priorities. And in this case, the types of cuts come in at the expense of a lot of our most vulnerable citizens.
Does your caucus privately talk about a 1 cent increase in the sales tax for 2 years? Anyone?
Or even a half cent.
Even a half cent. Is that just
There are a lot of ideas out there.
okay?
I don't know if members talk about things as much as a lot of the advocates for school funding reform before the economy was this bad or before some of the changes we've seen have long said, let's dedicate 1 cent for schools to address a lot of the existing problems. I mean, we have to remember, even before this budget, we were having challenging times given the, increased needs and challenges of a lot of our students. I think it was reported in Oshkosh, where now over 40% of our children qualify for free or reduced school lunch. That's certainly a more challenging population than we've had in the past here. This administration made it pretty clear that they weren't going to look at, increasing revenues. However, some of the cuts they've made,
It's decreasing revenue.
well, but they cut the earned income tax credit, one of the most effective anti-poverty programs, was cut by $50 million. So 250,000 Wisconsin citizens who, are some of our poorest, are going to have their taxes go up 50%. The homestead credit, which helps those who can least afford our property taxes afford it, was the indexing was replaced, and a large chunk of these people are over the age of 65. So you're talking about a lot of single people that are low income or fixed income who are going to have their property taxes increase a lot more than they would have. So taxes are increasing. It just happens to be on the poorest people, and they made a change to combined reporting that allows companies to use a certain loophole again by hiring enough attorneys.
See, that's just, I get so ticked off with all this crap that this man is doing to let the rich and the corporate entities skate by, and balancing budgets on the backs of the middle and low class, working class people. I've got a question for you about Governor Walker in particular, and I know it's been talked about on the blogs and so forth, and I haven't seen where anybody's gotten an answer yet. Maybe you know the answer to this. He was fined something like, I believe, $7,000 for not coming forward and producing his the emails for violating the open records law. Is that something that has to be paid out of his own pocket? Or are we, the taxpayers, footing that bill for his refusal to comply with the law?
I'm not sure. That's a good question, and something I'll have to get back to you, and maybe you
Please
can share
do.
it with everybody.
Yes, I'd like to know the answer to that. One thing that I know is not provided for, and I know this because I just did a lot of research and did a story on this for a publication I write for. The Wisconsin Main Street program is not being funded at all in his proposed budget. Now, this is a program established in 1987 that costs right around $400,000 a year to operate, and yet under it, some 17,865 new jobs have been created, over 4,000 new businesses opened, over $1,135 million of public and private investment has been generated within the 30-some Main Street communities throughout the state. And the successes of this program go on and on and on. And there's an overall return investment on every state dollar that's invested into the program. There's a return of investment of $49.34. Now, here's a governor who talks about and campaigned on Wisconsin being open for business and creating jobs, and yet he provides no funding for a relatively small program that it makes a big impact on things.
And what happened to a lot of the well-known programs related to economic development that traditionally fell under the Department of Commerce is when they created the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation. All of these programs, at least the funding for them, went into that big pot. So it wasn't just the Main Street program, but some of the women and minority-owned business funding programs, all of those. And that was one of the concerns we had during that debate was, what happens to these programs, and I think some people on the other side said, well, no, they can still exist, but it seems like they're trying to maximize take all the money out of existing programs and put it into this Economic Development Corporation to be used as they see fit. I mean, part of the tipping fee at the at our landfill, that money was diverted to pay, instead of paying for recycling, it went into the Economic Development Fund. So, there's at every measure, one of the, I think you hit the nail on the head, is there's less accountability. Whether, opening up a loophole in corporate income tax payments, getting rid of designated programs and putting the money towards something that we don't know, getting rid of mandatory tests in the voucher system schools, all sorts of things that we've traditionally done to either measure how we're doing, to know where the dollars are going, or to to have a a responsible and accountable government are sort of being taken out, and it really, I think, feeds into some of the distrust that's out there, and I think a lot of it is real, but it's certainly perceived.
Well, I think Dan brought it up before, and I think too. I'm not opposed to making cuts, but let's not make cuts that are going to hurt people and their health and well-being. And while we're doing that, Dick Spanbauer and I talked about this on the phone after he had been on the show. He said that even to raise the state income tax or the state sales tax by just a half cent would raise something like $300 million. I
think it's more than that.
It could be. But I mean, that's just amazing that it could raise that kind of money. And, that's on a $10 purchase, you're talking from 50 cents to 55 cents. Now, that extra nickel's not going to hurt anybody. And if you can afford bigger ticket items, then you can afford an extra half cent, I feel. And again, I'm not saying don't cut, things out, but don't make cuts that are going to hurt people. And why isn't a sales tax increase being at least considered? I know everybody campaigned on no new taxes, but as you said earlier, taxes are going up anyway. It's just they're sort of hidden taxes, if you will.
I mean, a budget should be a planning document. What are our priorities? How are we going to address the challenges that exist? And regardless of who's, in charge, the challenges are usually, and the outcomes that we desire are pretty much the same. And I guess we know that education is one of the best investments we can make. We know a skilled workforce is going to be crucial. We know there are employers right now that rely on the feeder pool from our technical colleges, yet we're cutting the technical colleges by 30%. At a time when we have more enrollment than ever. We're gutting higher education. We're providing no more money for financial aid, even though tuition's going to be going up. And then we're giving away money to roads. We're giving money to companies to circumvent the system. I mean, if you want to lower corporate
not pay
income,
taxes.
lower corporate income taxes, lower the rate for everybody, but don't allow a loophole that only some can utilize. And so, I think, when we were debating the budget during the campaign last year, I said, look, there's going to be cuts, but we're going to protect our most vulnerable citizens and those who can least afford to get by, because that's an obligation we've always had here in the state. And we're going to try to not lose sight of the investments we need to make in the future. And the absolute disregard for public education, something Wisconsin has been known, for. It's why a lot of people come back. I don't know. I don't know what happened to sort of the challenges that need to be addressed, given the priorities that have been put forward in this budget, and what it means for the future of the state.
Just real quickly, what are you hearing from folks at budget hearings and with the, the speakers at the Joint Finance Committee hearings and so forth? Or emails and phone calls? What are you hearing from folks?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one positive of the last few months has been people are more engaged than ever. We've always suffered, I think, a little bit at the state level because the media coverage has sort of shrunk. People pay attention to local government and national government, but everything that's gone on the last few months have people really engaged, and they seem to be following things more. They're concerned. I think the school, the education cuts, and also the priorities. In other words, why are we taking money that normally goes to schools to significantly increase the transportation budget at a time like this? Why are we taking money out of public schools in Oshkosh to pay for virtual and charter schools for for-profit companies? Why are we expanding the ineffective voucher school program in Milwaukee at the expense of our public schools during this time? And so a lot of it is just a genuine concern and insecurity and vulnerability. Certainly there are a lot of advocates out there, as well. Again, there would be cuts to just about every program to some extent. But the priorities that have been put forth in this budget, I think, unfairly penalize the people who can least afford it, and maybe they're not the people that are as active politically and don't have an interest group, but it's something that we come to value and respect in this state, and we know it's the right thing to do. The transportation aids cuts, it's bad enough that we are jeopardizing our federal funding for our bus system, but by cutting aids to the city and then telling them that they can't raise any revenue, there are people who rely solely on public transit, especially a lot of our disabled population.
In about 20 seconds, can you real quickly tell us when you think this budget's going to get approved?
Things are going to move pretty quick here. I think you're going to see decisions by finance that are going to, what's going to be in, what's going to be out, but I think they're going to try to get it done by June. Maybe by the end of May, but the more problems there are, the more disagreements there are, the harder it'll be to do. But I think they want to put this away as fast as possible and maybe just carry the governor's water again.
Okay. All right. Well, Gordon, thanks for being here.
Thanks for coming, Gordon.
We appreciate your courage in answering the questions. So, unlike our state senator from this district.
Yep.
So, anyway, thank you. And thanks to all of you. We will see you next time. Until then, take good care. Keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.